Jarrett for a minute. You're welcome to listen. So, Dr. Bryant, good to see you. Have you had a good day so far?
I have. It's been a great day visiting campuses, talking to administrators. Lovely day.
Good, good. I know they're pleased to have you. So, and I know you're familiar with this both by experience as well as you've already been through at least a part of the morning. Um, and for the students on, and for you, Jared, the students submitted numerous questions. So I took the liberty, and Maya, Molly, and Grace, hopefully you agree or otherwise forgive me because it's kind of one or the other. So I've taken the liberty of putting these questions together in what surfaced to be a set of categories. And there are a couple that I've combined, or I may not ask exactly your question or anybody that sees this on the streaming, but it definitely, if it wasn't your question, it definitely was a question that I found to be extremely similar or get at exactly the same point or the same subject. So we wanted to be sensitive to all the subjects and as close as we could to the context of each question. So the categories I've come up with, Dr. Bryant, are equity and inclusion, and there are two questions. There's one that I identified in the current pandemic period. There are three around mental health. There's one around safety. There's one around board relationship with the superintendent, or the superintendent's relationship with the board, because it goes in that direction, at least as the question is read. And there are four in an environment that I would call post-COVID, like in the going forward from here, that have a relationship to COVID. And Dr. Bryant, as you hear these questions, but I really want to congratulate these students because there's some real thought given to these questions. And they come from a place that, in all honesty, your parents can't give, your teachers can't give, nobody else can give, only you. Because you walk in those shoes. Dr. Bryant doesn't, I don't, nobody else does. So these are very meaningful to us. So I thank you one and all for your questions. These are the same questions that we asked of the candidate yesterday and that we'll ask of the candidate tomorrow. Oh, good. We now have two Mollies.
Molly's. There are two Molly's.
Yes. So we have Maya, Molly, Maya, Molly, Grace. Okay. Thank you. We're delighted to have you with us. So these are the same questions because they really have to be. Because when you do this, just so you understand, whether it's the board who's going to ask these candidate questions or anybody else, everybody has to be asked the same questions because that's what they call HR, human resources. It's about protocol and ethics, and everybody has to be treated the same. So that's where we have we can push it a little bit over. So let's say we have max of 30 minutes, Dr. Bryant. We should be in good shape. If we get done slightly early, I have 4 extra questions that I just put in the extra category if we get there. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's deal with the two that deal, and at least lack of a better subject title, equity and inclusion. Okay, so the first one reads, how do you plan to help students and their families understand and solve current issues like racism, abuse, hunger, homelessness, bullying, and more in the Salt Lake City School District?
Thank you for the question. And for everybody watching and for those of us in the chat, it's really a pleasure to be speaking with you. I'm a huge proponent in making sure that student voice plays a huge role in district decision making, because at the end of the day, the decisions that the superintendent makes impact the student. So we need to keep the student in mind every step of the way. And this is a great question because what it tells me, as hopefully your future superintendent of Salt Lake, is that we're experiencing or we're seeing a lot of things that are giving us stress or alarm, whether that's racism, or maybe you know somebody who's been bullied, or you've been bullied, or whatever that may be. What I'm hearing is that there's a lot of things happening that are probably impacting our educational experience. And those are the types of problems that I really want to solve as your superintendent. So it's not an easy solution, but I think there are concrete things that we can do to ensure that all of us feel safe and welcome in our classrooms and outside. So there are a couple ways you can go about that. So one, there's the policy route, right? Just making sure that as a district from, a policy level that we have firm language around no student should be bullied on the basis of, their race or class or sexual orientation or whatever that may be. But I think where the gaps start is when the policy doesn't reflect the reality. So what do we do if I'm a student in high school and I'm seeing things that make me feel uncomfortable or unsafe? And that's going to be a lot of careful planning around making sure that all of us have tools in our toolbox to react to situations. And I'm thinking a lot of my staff. So making sure that, in addition to being a teacher or an assistant principal or a superintendent, there are a lot of things that are in our wheelhouse. But when I look at the superintendent job, I think about it very holistically. I'm not only the academic leader of the school district, but I'm the one who needs to make sure that my principals have a toolbox. They have a whole way of dealing with these various issues that you bring up in that question. And it's not just things that impact the students, but things that impact the families too. How do we address issues of, division amongst the lines of, race or identity or these things, right? Like I'm not the one who wants to come in and preach a certain belief. I'm the one who wants to make sure that all kids feel safe and that no one feels that they're being alienated by their peers. And in times when there are conflicts, just in general, that we have a very safe space where we can voice our concerns either to myself or to our administration, and we can address them. I think anytime that something like this comes up, there needs to be a formal process for investigating, for collecting information, for understanding what exactly is going on at this school and what can we do to change the culture. That could be very intentional workshops around issues that you may be seeing. It's going to be really situation by situation. It could be training for everybody from our bus drivers to teachers and staff like myself to be sure that if I see something or I hear something, even if it's on Twitter in a classroom, that I can address it swiftly. If there's one thing that I've learned, being an administrator for quite some time, is that you need to not let these things fester. If I hear from students like yourself saying, we have a serious bullying problem at such and such school, I don't want to just make sure, it gets better on its own. We need to have direct conversations about these incidents and these feelings now. And I want you to hear from my mouth that from the top down, there's no tolerance for any sort of bullying or discrimination because of your identity. In fact, this is a place where we can share our feelings, and you can have my word that your principals and staff members will receive, training and a lot of coaching around how to deal with these situations that are very nuanced and case by case. So I'll leave it at that.
Dr. Bryan, I have made a human error, so I'm going to ask for your forgiveness and ask you how you want to treat it. We should have given you about, a few minutes in the opening to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are. So we can do it that we can stop the questions and you can do that now, or you can do it at the end. What is your pleasure?
I'll do it now because a lot of you watching out there are like, who is this guy?
Yes, yeah. Very good idea. So one other thing I want you to know, because I in the question section, one of the Mollies and I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Dhati, Dhati, has also joined us under Molly's name, one of the Mollies. Okay, so they're with us. And this is a student member of the school board also. So I just wanted to make sure that they were appropriately recognized. Okay, just so you know. So instead of looking like we have two people and it's up there twice, we actually legitimately have all 5 different people on this that are live, and then obviously all the ones on streaming. So let me, no further ado and take up any more time. Please introduce yourself and accept my apology for my human error here.
No problem. So I'm Dr. Jarrett Bryant, and I'm super excited to be here as a contender to be your superintendent of Salt Lake City schools. Education is my passion. I've known it for a while. I was one of those students in college who was very lost. I went to Yale University and, I'm good at math and solving problems and that sort of thing. But I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I ended up taking this incredible course that changed my whole outlook on life called Solving the American Education Crisis. And, it's almost it's very interesting to think that, a single class can change your entire life, but in this situation, it did. So this is a course I took in college at Yale, which a lot of you may think of as, kind of elite, kind of errs on the side of a lot of affluent students from all over the world and all over the country. But there are a lot of transformational things that I experienced at Yale. And one of them was that I actually got to meet people on the whole end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So for example, I went to school with royalty from X and Y country and sons of CEOs and that sort of thing. But the people who made the biggest impression on me were a very special group of students who usually grew up in rural cities across America, or went to a school that didn't have a college counselor. And there are a few people that come to mind, and I couldn't help but ask them, somebody who went to a high school that always sends students to places like Yale. I asked this person, how did you get here? How did you find out about Yale? Like, this is amazing. I'm just hearing your story growing up in such a small underserviced town. He shared with me that he got a pamphlet in the mail where basically it said that if you're a low income student, that you can go to Yale for free, essentially. So it's cheaper than community college if you can get in. And he thought it was a joke. He thought it was like some sort of scam. So he asked a trusted adult about it. And they actually said, no, this is legit. There are a lot of universities out there that are full need, which means that if you can't afford to go to college, they'll pay the difference. So for a lot of our lowest income students, they don't have to pay anything. Or if you're a middle income student, you'll pay half price. You'll pay the price of an open 4-year. So that's a long-winded way of saying that going to a college with a lot of different people changed my life. And when I took that class, I realized that I love solving problems. And there are a lot of problems in education that need to be fixed on a systemic level. But I don't think that there's any way to be a system level leader typically unless you've been in the classroom in some sort of way. So for me, that was teaching. So I started out my career as a high school math teacher. I loved it. I worked on the east side of Houston through a program called Teach for America. And essentially, I loved it. My school was primarily low income. I would say it's 99% Latino. And there were so many things that I loved about teaching, but I think that there was a weight that kind of was on my shoulders, where a lot of these students have really systemic issues that they're facing related to poverty or food insecurity or whatever that is. So I was constantly thinking, okay, I love teaching. I'm in this for a while, but how am I going to make my impact? And that's something as students, I want you to think about a lot, where how do you want to make your impact on the world? So I spent a lot of time thinking about what gives me energy, what gets me excited. And what really changed the game for me was I was wrapping up my second year of teaching, and I meet a guy who pitches an idea to me, and he says, hey, I want to start this nonprofit that finds our low income but very bright students, and we're going to give them all of the college counseling and test preparation and coaching that they need to succeed at whether it's Yale or Stanford or Rice or whatever that college is of their dreams, because I think that they can do it with the right resources. Any student can succeed and achieve their dream. So that spoke to me for a lot of reasons that are personal to me. So I dropped everything that I was doing and I founded this program from the ground up. So I spent years trying to figure out, okay, what exactly do students need to be successful? There's a lot of equity gaps out there in schools. And I had the luxury of being able to work alongside brilliant people to solve that problem. I was very motivated by that specific problem. So fast forward, I've sent thousands of students off to highly selective universities, over 165 of them. And the reason why we focus on selective schools is not because we care about elitism in Houston ISD. It's because these happen to be schools that give generous financial aid and scholarships, basically full rides to most of Houston ISD type students. And then on top of that, their graduation rates are in the 96+%. So there are a lot of strategic reasons why we chose those schools. And now we've expanded to 5 school districts and we're thriving. But, just to kind of put a bow on where I'm going with this is I realized that I love the problem of solving equity gaps for students. The Emerge program that I helped found was great. But what about everybody else? There are some students that don't want to go to Rice University or whatever that is, and they want to go to community college or they want to go to a 4-year. So I was very fortunate enough to raise millions of dollars to make sure that every single high school and eventually every single middle school had a college counselor. Because believe it or not, in Houston schools about 8 years ago, half of the high schools didn't have a college counselor at all. So that was a problem that I really wanted to fix. And that question that I posed earlier, like, how do you want to make your impact? That was the problem that I wanted to solve next. I wanted to solve the access to college counseling gap. Then I went on to solving different issues. I became an assistant superintendent at the age of 25, and I've been doing this role for a while, leading different stuff. And that's because I've been blessed with people, whether it was a teacher who, I would say crazy things as a kid, like, I'm going to be the president. And, they wouldn't say, no, Jarrett, you can't do that. They would be like, yeah, well, I support you in this. I believe in you. I have a lot of mentors to this day that do the same thing. And they entrusted me with a lot of responsibilities that I didn't know I was ready for, but they did. So they allowed me to thrive in that position. And, I've been focusing on these gaps that they relate to post-secondary success, university relationships, making sure kids graduate from school, college, or career ready. That's what I do. That's what I love, because I think that with the right information and resources, any of us can achieve our dreams, whether that's a well-paying job out of high school, whether that's going to community college, whether that's going to Yale like me. I think anything is possible. We just need to make sure that students get the tools, and too many of our students don't get those tools out of the box.
Okay. Thank you, Jared. So time's kind of fleeting. We're going to have about 15 minutes, and we got, if I count all the questions still left, we have 11. So I'm going to start taking one from each category and then coming back to the, you know what I mean? That way, at least you get to touch bases that I feel are important. If you can do it quickly, then at least we'll close out the equity and inclusion, and then we'll take the pandemic and one mental health, one safety, one board, one post-COVID, and come back to mental health. And that's how we'll bounce it down so we can cover. So the second equity and inclusion is the Salt Lake City schools have a very diverse population. How do you think your background will help you to create solutions that will best address everyone? Do you have any plans you would like to implement immediately?
So great question. So this is what I do. So I currently work for the largest district in Texas. We have almost as many schools as days in the year, and we serve primarily low-income students. So we're over 80% economically disadvantaged, and we're majority minority. We have 25% African-American students and over 60% Hispanic. So every initiative that I mentioned in my intro, that's always been done with the focus of closing the equity gap for students, the students who need it the most, giving those students more college, giving those students more opportunities to succeed. In Houston, we pay for everybody's advanced placement exams, all of their dual credit tuition, whatever they need. So there's no barriers. All you need to do is bring your brain and your positive attitude to the table, and we'll get rid of all the nitty gritty financial stuff. We'll get that out of the way. So I love that. I think my job has prepared me for that. Houston ISD has the highest performing schools in the nation, and we literally have the lowest performing schools in the state. And I've built programs that have worked in all of those different environments. So I understand every school is different. And I can tackle those issues accordingly. In terms of, are there initiatives that I want to implement off the bat? Of course, there are things I'm passionate about. I think that I'll always be someone that really believes in college and career readiness, but I'm not coming to Salt Lake City prepared to implement X, Y, Z. I really want to respect the autonomy and the brilliance of a lot of our principals and other staff members and listen to them, conduct a listening and learning tour, and figure out what's going to work for this district that may or may not work in a different place.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, the pandemic question that we're going to look at is, how do you plan on keeping students safe during the ongoing pandemic? And what will the rules be regarding mask, social distancing, and hybrid scheduling?
Sure. So in the short term, we need to follow the guidance of our local, state, and federal governments as they apply to social distancing and masking, and ensuring that as many of our staff members have access to vaccines should they want to take a vaccine at this point in time. I believe in that. You need to look at the science. I am not an expert in public health and safety. So that's why I really lean not just on what I hear on the news, but also task force, creating strategic task force of people in this community too. As superintendent, I'll have access to all sorts of different healthcare providers and medical professionals who can give me guidance to really make sure that we fulfill the needs that meet the standards that Salt Lake City students deserve. So I guess to sum up, because we have a lot of questions, I'm someone who's not going to invent a solution when it comes to medical health and safety. I want to make sure that all of our students have access to PPE and rapid testing, and to amplify those initiatives until we're at a place where we've reached a herd immunity, and hopefully we can get a little closer to what we would consider normal. But following that local and state guidance is going to be critical.
Thank you. Okay, now let's turn our attention, if you will, to the mental health category, which is obviously most appropriate anytime, but particularly during the course of the last year. What will you do to improve the increasing mental health problems of students and teachers in the Salt Lake City School District?
Sure. I think we need to create safe spaces where we can really feel okay about taking care of ourselves. I think right now, all of us are feeling the weight of a lot of different problems and issues that we probably hadn't even thought about until a few years ago. On top of the fact that I'm assuming, we're high school students here, we're thinking about, where am I going to college? We're thinking about, what club should I be joining? We're thinking about, how am I going to master this chemistry concept? There's a lot that you as students especially are going through that we need to validate. And we need to normalize the idea that as a result of all of the noise and problems around us, that it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to say, as a superintendent or as a teacher or as a student, that I don't know if I can do this without extra help. I need extra help. And it's incumbent upon me as superintendent to make sure that those structures are there. Maybe we need more social workers and services than we've needed in the past, because we're all going through something that's unique and unprecedented in all of our lives. I'm a big partnership guy. I am also a numbers guy. So I want to look at our budgets and see, our resources align to what I'm hearing, because you're not the first group to bring up this issue of mental health. So what I'm hearing is that, we're not invincible, and we react to stress in different ways, and we need access to the services that are going to help me deal with these issues. So one, I'm a big believer in the training and empowering principals and staff to have tools to talk with students and each other. But I'm also a big fan of partnerships too, where, if we don't have a social worker necessarily at every single high school, I wonder what nonprofit organizations and other partnerships that we can form, perhaps with the university here, to figure out how we can scale access to professionals that can help us work through issues, both from the very serious and severe to the one where we just need somebody to talk to. What types of structures can I implement that address, lack of mentorship? I think a lot of us just feel kind of like lost souls right now. And there are a lot of really strategic things that I could implement as superintendent to connect more students with people who are going through things similar to they are, who are older and have figured out coping mechanisms that they can share. So I'm very open-minded when it comes to addressing this very challenging topic of mental health.
Thank you. All right, now we'll turn our attention to safety. How will you work to create safe and welcoming learning environments that will take into consideration all students in the district? We are such a diverse district, and knowing that all students will be supported and validated in whoever they are is very important.
Yeah, and that goes back to some of my comments earlier, where I don't want to have schools where we don't feel like we can be who we are. I think that one of the beautiful things about this country, for example, is that we can have different ideas and beliefs about things, and we can have dialogues to where we can have conflict in very healthy ways. Similarly, a lot of us have different identities that vary from, one identifies as being a part of the LGBT community, if one identifies with a particular cultural group. We can have conversations where we can learn to accept each other, because you're right, in Salt Lake City, we have so many diverse voices and perspectives in our schools, and that's an asset. That's a beautiful thing, to be able to go to school or to attend a district where over 80 different languages are spoken, where we have people that identify as all sorts of different identities. So how can we create a space? How can I create a space as a leader that fosters dialogues and understanding amongst these groups is one of the big things that I want to talk about. So on my end, I want to speak to our campus leaders. I want to speak to students just like you and hear exactly what's going on, because I think every district, every school is different. I don't want to project what I'm seeing in Houston to Salt Lake. But I have guesses. I've seen some things ranging from bullying and harassment to discrimination that make us all feel unsafe for various ways. So for me, student voice is going to be essential. So I'm really going to bring the question back to you all as superintendent and really talk about, what are you seeing? Because if I don't hear about the problem, I might not know about it. Or, my perspective on the world might be different from your perspective on the world. So I want to hear it, even if it's something that I don't want to hear. That's my job, is to really understand what students are saying, because at the end of the day, if we feel that our schools aren't safe places to be, that's going to impact learning. And my job is to make sure that our schools are effective vehicles for world-class learning here in Salt Lake City. So that will be an ongoing conversation between me and student leaders like yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. The next question is around superintendent board relations. What skills do you have that will unite the board members into a functional team?
Sure. I'm really excited to come to Salt Lake City because I do believe that myself alongside our board can make change happen. I think that it's been a rough couple years for all of us, and Salt Lake is no exception. But in my conversations with the board, I feel like this is a time where, this is a giant reset button for a lot of us. We're in the middle of an unprecedented pandemic, which has made us question a lot of our assumptions. And I say this coming from a large school system where there are so many things that we thought were non-negotiable back in the day. We used to think that, teaching had to look a certain way, and it doesn't have to look a certain way. I know a lot of us want to get back to school. I want to support us getting back to school too, but I do want to validate that some of us are probably thriving online as well. So thinking through, how can we take lessons that we learn from this pandemic to create positive change? And when it comes to working with the board specifically, I'm a big believer in listening and empathy, and also being very clear on the roles and responsibilities. So, if you don't know, what you should know as students about the superintendent and the school board is that there are distinct roles that can sometimes get blurred. But really what I hope that this board chooses to do is to really listen to stakeholders, including myself, to set goals that are really going to create a vision for us moving forward. So once they set what these goals and, big picture metrics are, then I can create the how. So I could really bring my practitioner hat to the table as somebody who's worked in an urban school system for, almost a decade now. My perspective for, okay, well, if this is the goal, I need to have a lot of leeway to work with my student leaders, to work with parents, to work with principals and teachers to figure out how it's going to work on the campus level too, because not all campuses are the same either. But I really need to determine that how. And that's something where sometimes the lines get blurred. We're all community members, right? So we all have certain agendas that we want to accomplish that do positive things for kids, right? So sometimes, in different cities, board members do take on some of the how. And it's incumbent upon me to really manage up if I see a situation where I feel that the roles are getting blurred, where we just have honest conversations about it. I would say that, one of my superpowers is being able to listen to what people are saying. A lot of people just kind of like talk so they can make a response. But my commitment to our board is to really listen to every single one of them regularly, so I understand where they're coming from. So I understand what we need to do to work cohesively as a group, because my vision is that eventually we're going to be at a place where we're going to have a very safe environment where we can disagree about issues. It's going to happen. And we're going to share our perspectives and challenges and opportunities with each other as a group. But when the decision's made, I want us all to emerge from that boardroom or wherever it is, united on what that decision was. No grudges, no messiness, none of that stuff. Because I do believe in the dignity that is a locally elected school board representing their communities and solving issues that are for the better of the whole district.
Thank you. All right, this is our first post-COVID question, and we're getting very close to the end, Dr. Bryant. What resources is the district willing to provide for kids who have fallen back significantly because of the pandemic? Also, are you going to support all of our teachers who have had to deal with teaching through this pandemic in a hybrid model and fully online?
I think a
So,
lot of things. So I think a lot of those things are up for discussion. Those are not things that I can unilaterally say, like, this is what we're doing. Because I really believe that we need to listen to our student leaders. We need to listen to the community. We need to listen to teachers too, to figure out what needs to happen. Now, as the practitioner, I can tell you that if I needed to figure out where to put my dollars towards, it would be this gap. In Salt Lake City, I've looked at the data, and there are gaps between student groups that only become wider as we progress through, middle school and eventually high school. And I'm the type of leader that wants to make sure that we have more students completing the International Baccalaureate program, for example, that we have more students that are participating in, robotics courses or things that are going to impact their future. But that's going to take a lot of conversations around how do we catch up now? Because now we're even further behind than we were before. So you have my commitment to make sure that we have those dialogues. And like I alluded to, I do sense that some of us need extra time to catch up on what we lost. So I'm willing to figure out how we can be creative and just find more time, because at the end of the day, I want us to be college ready. And if that means that we need opportunities for people to engage in more learning in a highly effective learning environment, I'm open to ideas. I want to make that happen. Some of us are thriving, but some of us are very behind. And I would say my top 3 priorities are really closing that gap, so making sure that students don't continue to fall behind.
Okay, there are 2 fairly short answer questions, if you will, and then we would have to conclude. And the last one is one I'm definitely going to ask all 3 of you, and it doesn't fall into any of the categories. It just makes me smile. So this question is in the mental health category. What do you think about offering students mental health days and excused absences?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think that's out of the box. I'm a big innovative thinker. I don't see why not. As adults, we have mental health days and, sick days and that sort of thing. I don't see why you can't have some sort of, privilege of being able to, take time for you. I think that's how you solve a lot of mental health issues, is by taking time to invest in what gives you energy.
This last one is kind of it's become a takeoff on names and words about what it really means, but I'm sure you would be familiar. Do you plan on having George Bush lunches or Michelle Obama lunches? Good lunches or bad lunches?
So I think when I was in high school, it was George Bush lunches. I remember them being decent. I don't recall thinking one way or the other. I think when I was a teacher, we had those Obama lunches, and I had a couple of school tamales that gave me pause. I feel like they weren't the highest quality, but they were very nutritious. I'm open-minded, but as we all know, we all fall under the auspices of the U.S. Department of Health and Nutrition Services, so we need to make sure we meet their standards. But I'm all for healthy lunches. I'm all for lots of lunches. I'm the type of guy that eats lunch 5 times a day. That's just who I am.
Thank you. I couldn't resist, and I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to answer that one. So it's clever. Dr. Bryant, if you just want to take 1 minute to close, you're more than welcome. I just want to thank you. I really want to thank the students, and Maya put in the question box, have you dealt with real life situations like this before? And that came over the first equity and inclusion, but I think you got to some of it. Maya, I'm sorry we're not going to have time to address it, but we certainly haven't overlooked it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm so appreciative of your time as well, to really listen thoughtfully to all the different candidates so that you can make your voice heard, because you deserve the best superintendent to lead you through this next chapter. I think I can be that person, and I hope that I took the time to help you understand a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and I hope that I get to work with you.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you. And Maya does say he answered it in the next question. So thanks, Maya, for your reassurance for both Dr. Bryant and myself. So we appreciate that a great deal. Remember, students and students out there who have been on streaming, go to your school district website, click on the search bar. in there is your impression form to make sure your voice is heard. There are these characteristics in there that talk about, please think about this candidate around this, and this. And then there's a comment section and you're asked to write. Your board will read your comments as students alone, as well as the other groups, before they make their final consideration in their selection. Your voice will be heard. Please don't be shy and make yourself known. Thank you very much for all this time, Dr. Bryan. Thank you and best of luck. And I know Salt Lake City is delighted to have you in their midst during this whole day. All the best. Be safe. Be well.